There is a bird in a Japanese forest that has learned to say one word, one sound, a specific sequence of notes that every other bird in that forest has been hearing their entire life. A sound so hardwired into their nervous system that hearing it produces an involuntary physical response, immediate, automatic, impossible to suppress. The sound means snake, and sometimes the bird making it knows there is no snake. It does it anyway. Because it works. Because when every other bird within earshot hears that sound and scatters in a panic, the food they left behind is still sitting there. And the bird that made the call walks over alone and eats in peace. A bird just committed fraud, using a word it knows, about a predator it invented, to steal food from animals that trusted it. Scientists called this finding surprising. What they found when they dug into exactly how the deception works is something considerably more unsettling, because it does not just show that birds can lie. It shows that birds understand at some level what a lie is. And the researcher who discovered it has spent nearly 20 years in the forests of central Japan, proving that this one small bird has a more sophisticated relationship with language than anyone thought was possible outside of a primate. His name is Toshitaka Suzuki, and this is what he found. Let's establish what we are actually dealing with, because the Japanese tit, Parus minor, looks like the least likely candidate for any of this. 11 centimeters long, less than 20 grams, a black cap, white cheeks, and olive green back. It lives in mixed woodland across East Asia and spends most of its time doing what small birds do, foraging, avoiding predators, maintaining social bonds with other birds of multiple species in the same forest. Nothing about it suggests what Suzuki's 2 decades of field research have revealed. The Japanese tit produces more than 10 acoustically distinct call types, each triggering specific responses in other birds. Not general emotional states, not "I am alarmed," but precise referential signals. A call that means scan for danger, a call that means approach, a call that means food found, and a call that means snake specifically. Not predator generically, but snake. The distinction matters. Nestlings hearing the snake call jump out of the nest and flee. Hearing the crow call, they crouch down and stay inside. Same nest, same bird, completely different survival strategy, triggered entirely by which call they heard. These birds do not respond to the calls in a uniform way, but appear to retrieve a snake image and then decide how to deal with the predator according to the circumstance. The calls carry mental content. They cause receivers to build a specific internal representation of a specific threat, and then act on that representation appropriately. Until Suzuki published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, the ability to visualize something after hearing a word was thought to be a human-only trait. That assumption did not survive contact with a Japanese forest. Suzuki had spent years documenting the snake alarm call system when he noticed something that didn't fit. What he observed in Karuizawa, his long-term field site in Nagano Prefecture, was a great tit producing the snake alarm call with no snake present. The call went out, nearby birds scattered, the food they had been eating was left behind, and the caller moved in to eat alone. He documented it. He watched for the pattern. What he found was that the deception was not random or accidental. It was strategic. It occurred specifically in competitive feeding situations, when dominant birds wanted access to food that smaller birds were occupying. The false call cleared the area. The food remained. The caller knew what the call meant. It knew that other birds would flee, and it deployed that knowledge to manufacture a threat that did not exist. Now here is the part that changes the nature of the finding entirely. Producing a false alarm is one thing, but for it to qualify as genuine deception, rather than a lucky mistake that happened to work, it requires something specific from the receiving birds. It requires that the call actually creates a mental image of a snake in their minds, not just a reflexive scatter response. Because if the response is purely reflexive, automatic, no mental representation involved, then the deceiver is exploiting a trigger, not a belief. Pressing a button, not telling a lie. Suzuki designed an experiment to find out which of these was true. Using audio playback and a short stick cut from a tree branch, he moved the stick in a serpentine fashion up a tree trunk while playing the snake alarm call. The birds approached and reacted as though confronting a real snake. When he played a different call and moved the stick the same way, no response. When he played the snake call but moved the stick laterally, no response. Both inputs had to match. The call primed a specific mental template of a snake. The stick only triggered alarm when it moved in a way that fit that template. The birds were not pressing a button. They were updating a mental model of their environment based on linguistic input, and then cross-referencing that model against what they could see, which means what the deceiving bird was exploiting was not a reflex. It was a belief. It told a lie. And the lie worked because the audience believed it. Here is what this means beyond one bird in one forest. Deception, in the technical sense, requires a specific cognitive architecture. You have to know something the other party does not know. You have to understand that your communication will update their model of the world. And you have to deliberately produce a false update because that false model will produce behavior that benefits you. That requires holding two mental models simultaneously, your own knowledge state and someone else's, and reasoning about the gap between them. This sits alongside Suzuki's other findings as part of the same picture. Tits combine their calls using compositional syntax, specific sequences that produce specific meanings, where reversing the order of elements changes the meaning receivers extract. Word order matters. That is grammar, in the precise linguistic sense. A bird that uses grammar and a bird that lies are, taken together, describing a relationship with language that has no precedent in our understanding of what a 12-gram brain is capable of producing. Let's be precise about what has and has not been established. What has been documented across peer-reviewed studies in PNAS, Nature Communications, and Current Biology. The Japanese tit produces referential calls that cause receivers to form specific mental representations. The snake alarm is produced in the absence of snakes during competitive feeding, with direct benefit to the caller. Syntactic structure affects interpretation, and reversing element order changes meaning. What remains debated is intentionality, whether the deception involves conscious awareness of the receiver's mental state, or whether it is a more automatic behavior reinforced by its consistent effectiveness. That question is genuinely unresolved. What is not debated is what Suzuki observed in Karuizawa. The call went out, there was no snake, the birds scattered, the food was taken. Suzuki began as a bird watcher. He started tracking Japanese tits as a teenager, moving through the same forest where he would later conduct his field experiments. He was not looking for language, he was looking at birds. What he found, by looking carefully at things everyone else had looked at and stopped noticing, was that a small bird in a temperate forest had developed a relationship with sound that required rewriting what the entire field thought it knew. The Japanese tit is not extraordinary by the usual metrics. It is not large. It does not have an unusually large brain. It is not a primate or a cetacean. None of the animals cognitive science had pre-selected as the most promising candidates for complex communication. It is 11 centimeters long, and it figured out that a word can be a weapon. The next time you hear a bird alarm call in a garden or a park, that urgent, repeated note that makes every nearby bird freeze or scatter, consider the possibility that the bird making it knows exactly what it is doing, that it has assessed the situation, that it has made a choice, and that the choice might not be about a predator at all. If this changed how you hear the birds around you, subscribe. Every week, the science that makes the ordinary world unrecognizable. And before you go, if birds use grammar, if birds can lie, if birds form mental images from sounds they hear, what else have we been wrong about? What other animals are having conversations we haven't learned to recognize yet? Drop it in the comments. I read every one. See you in the next one.